we'll have some fun. Well, it's that time again. Another Malt Travail podcast. This is episode 35, would you believe? We're recording this on the 10th of May. So we've had a bit of a break, but we've got you two in 2 weeks now. It can't be bad. Right, I'll turn the music off. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening, everybody.
You had a few glitches getting us all sorted out, but we're all in. We're all in cyberspace or whatever it is. So yeah, it's a very nice. Well, it's quite a pleasant evening down here. It's going to be a little bit cool.
Windy up here. Windy.
Oh, right, but cold up in York. Yes.
And I think another first for a while in that we all seem to have beer in the glass as well, which is we must do Tuesdays more often. So Nick's on a new beer, I hear. Nick's on a.
This is the Fellwalker Pale Ale, made by Bonus Bay Brewing. This is what I picked up in booths over in Penrith last week. £1.49 a bottle. It's a 4.1. As it describes itself as a refreshing golden ale, it's certainly golden. It's very light coloured, and it is very refreshing. It's got slight apple tone to it. You can just imagine if you've been out in the fell for a good old walk and you've got a couple of bottles of this lying in some nice lake or tarn somewhere cooling down. Yeah, it'd be very refreshing, like that one. And I've put it in my Newcastle Brewing Ale schooner, just for a little bit of nostalgia.
Lovely. And Bruce, you've got beer.
I have, yes. Well, I was in Newcastle on Saturday and went to Phoenix Food Hall, which was amazing. Talk about growing up north. It's like Harrods on steroids, is Phoenix Food Hall. It was just full of like people in design and dress. Astonishing place, though. Say full of wags and extremely wealthy people paying through the nose.
And civil servants, Bruce. Civil servants as well. Yeah, only folks could afford it.
Absolute madness. If you're ever in Newcastle, you're going to go see it. We should take some pictures. It's absolutely astonishing. I had no idea. We got Newcastle a lot. I never think to go in the food halls. Never need anything. I had a bit of time to kill. It is absolutely astonishing. It really is the Harrods of the North, that food hall. But they do have a little craft beer section, and I came across some Two Roads IPA. It's half price because obviously the people who go there didn't particularly like it. It describes a crushable IPA with Zeka, Equinox, and Mosaic hops. And it's brewed in the Two Roads Brewing Company in Stratford, Connecticut, I believe.
I'm going to say it's not American, right? Very nice.
American, yeah.
Good stuff.
How much, Bruce? How much?
Well, it should have been £2.40 can, but it was half price at £1.19.
That's all right.
It's got it's a bit. You can see it's a bit cloudy. It's overwhelmingly hoppy. It's incredibly massive malt overload. It's almost like if you're walking past a brewery brewing fresh ale, but the beer had gone a bit off, Yeah, I don't like it. I have to say, I don't like it.
Well, I think May is mild month, isn't it? So I'm back on. You can't see it in my camera now. I'm back on I'm trying to get through my Green King box that my nephew bought me for Christmas. So I've still got a couple of Rudolphs, but the Double X mild is not so bad for midweek because it's on 3%. And I don't know, a Green King are kind of growing on me a little bit. I know we've probably moaned about them a bit, but I don't know. I've read some of that Roger Prott's book about family brewers, and of course, they are still an independent brewery. So anyway, we're back on to our A to Z of pub crawls. So we had a little bit of a break over Easter, and then we did a catch up. You remember last time? So we pulled out before Easter the letters G, J, and W. So those are going to be our focuses tonight. Again, we have just about chosen different things, although there is one double hit, which we'll come to under W. But as always, let's kick off with a little bit of kind of beery highlights and some beer news. So we mentioned in the last podcast that Bruce had a fairly epic journey over the bank holiday weekend. Probably to do something with cheap train tickets, thanks to the Chancellor Sunak.
It was, yeah.
So come on then, Bruce. So you start, well, you're messing me at one point. You were in Malag and then on the way to the Isle of Skye.
No, we never got to Skye.
Oh, you never got to Skye? Oh.
We only went to Malag and back. Yeah, we, as Michael correctly pointed out, thanks to, not only thanks to Rishi Sunak's rail sale, but more importantly to ScotRail's amazing Club 50 offer. If you're over 50 now, you can pay a one-off fee of £15 and join ScotRail Club 50. And we get you discounts all throughout the year, but 3 times a year, they do insane deals. And of course, we've all heard about the West Highland Railway line. It's supposed to be the finest railway line in the world. So when we realised we could go from Edinburgh to Mallaig for £12, which is normally £98, it was that we could look at gift horse in the mouth. So me and my very elderly friend set up at 7:35 at York on Friday morning to sort of cushion the blow bit of the long journey. We did go first class to Edinburgh on LNE, which obviously was really quite good. They had a proper breakfast served to us. That was quite nice. So we did first class to Edinburgh, filled our bags full of biscuits and bottles of water from the lounge. And then, of course, went across to Glasgow. Our 12-pound journey started in Edinburgh, so we shot across to Glasgow. Those trains are really fast now. That's an impressive service. And then got on the train at Queen Street.
You got past one of the distilleries there, don't you, bro? See all the wooden barrels outside?
Yeah. Beaumont, yeah.
Yeah.
So we got on the Queen Street at 11:15. It was a little 6-carriage diesel multiple unit, and it splits at 3 points at Garlock Head and somewhere else going off to Oban and leaves to Fort William. So it was absolutely stunning, I have to say. The train, like Nick says, the train goes through the Glasgow suburbs. Your last bit of Glasgow is going through the Dalmuir estate, where everybody suddenly clutches their bags very quickly. And then you're on the banks of the Clyde, which in itself is a quite spectacular journey by the banks of the Clyde. And then, of course, you come all the way up there. And once you get past the Fastnet submarine base on your left, you can see that by the barbed wire. Then you're at Garlock Head. And then, of course, Loch Lomond's on the right-hand side. You go right by the shores of Loch Lomond. Train then splits for Oban. We stay on it, and then, of course, you're into the insane moors part of the West Highland line, up to Curragh, which is Britain's most isolated railway station. It's 1,235 feet above sea level. Lots of these stations, I have to say, well, in fact, all the stations, I have to say, put ours to shame. The way that ScotRail maintain those rural stations is an absolute credit to them.
It's probably all bloody English money that's subsidising the Brooks.
I don't think we can really say
They'll
that.
keep telling you it's from North East Gas. It's us taxpayers.
Well, it's how
they've never had it so good in Scotland.
It's how they distribute the money into it. But every station, I have to say, was in immaculate condition. There are lots of them well up on that Highland line. They've got tea rooms, they've got cafes in, they've got little bunkhouses, hotels, restaurants. Fantastic. And then, of course, beyond that, we get the bit where you approach sort of Ben Nevis, which is quite stunning. The trains at point, it's on like cliff ledges. So eventually it'll be Fort William, and then do that final bit from Fort William to Mallaig, which is absolutely amazing.
The Glenfinnan, don't you? Glenfinnan Viaduct.
Right. You pass Neptune Steps, which is the biggest section of locks in the country.
Yeah.
And then you head round to the Glenfinnan Viaduct, and the guards rail into the spirit of even the little cheap train. The guard has some dramatic music. He announces a viaduct. The train slows down, and he plays some music over his mobile phone of the PA as you go to the viaduct. So yes,
Hope you've got a PRS license.
so full marks for that. And then eventually we got into Mallaig at 5:45. Mallaig's cracking at the town, I have to say. Of course, that beach as you go into Mallaig was one of the bits used in a local hero. Most of it was filmed on the opposite side of the country, but for that iconic bit with the chapel on the beach, that's actually just outside Mallaig. A proper little working fishing town, Mallaig. I say would be a sleepy town, but of course it's energised a bit because the ferries go across to Skye to Annandale. So you've got a big Calmac ferry there, which leaves I think 3 times a day. And of course, you've got the Jacobite Express that runs daily from Easter, I believe, to the end of October. So for every day, you've this influx of people come to the village for 2 3/4 hours and spend money in the pubs. So yeah, it's quite an interesting little place. You know, there's a big, huge salmon factory fishing boat station there. It brings a bit of life to the place, the ferry. But they've got 3 pubs, although one of them, bizarrely, after 2 years of lockdown, they decided everything's open. They're close to get refurbished, which was absolutely bonkers. The Marine Hotel. So there was a place we were in, and then the Clackan, which was fab.
Yeah, I've been in that one. Yeah.
Have you been to Clackan?
Yeah, I've been to Clackan. Yeah.
Yeah, we stayed in the Steaming. The pub itself was a bit nondescript, I have to say. The accommodation was great, fantastic. They made a great job of the accommodation, and the breakfast was great. But the pub itself a bit nondescript. So as soon as we got there, we're delighted to see they had the Isle of Skye ales on. Thankfully, it was around. So John got that beers. He got 2 pints of Skye beer, £14. £14, outrageous.
Well, and they're not spending money on advertising and promotion, really, Bruce. I mean,
you can see Skye from where they are. And I have to say, whilst
I'm talking about the pub clips. In anybody's watching the YouTube, the branding. It's it's not state the art Saatchi and Saatchi, really, is it?
Just beer mat stuck on the pumps.
Yeah. Red or gold.
We did think, is
Sky
there a locals price and a tourist price?
Yeah.
There, but I have to say, the beer wasn't great, you know. It wasn't great. Lovely thing to be from the Skye. But then we went to the Clackan, booked a table for dinner, and that was great. I mean, the Clackan's one of those places that you kind of get in Scotland. You get them in Northern Ireland and some of the small towns in Northern Ireland, and they're quite unique. We have nothing like them in England. They're the pubs for everybody. I mean, they were producing, it was packed, it was Friday night, but they were doing fantastic food. Yet despite that, you had gangs of young lads coming in, drinking. Obviously, they know they've got to be here because they get banned, they've nowhere to go. You had tourist seating, there was a pool table in the corner, big place, but literally, unlike England, where they don't exist, it was a pub for everybody, I have to say. And I have to say, the food was astounding. We had some amazing Stornoway black pudding fritters. I had a haggis, and I have to say the whiskey sauce was like something you'd expect to find the final master chef. It was immense. But I say it was extraordinary, you know. Gangs of young lads in there. The next to us, there's a lovely couple who visit from Yorkshire, like us. They're eating a £80 seafood platter with an expensive bottle of wine, and everybody just gels along together. So
did they end off the night with the Keldy bros?
No, there's no Kylie story, no Taylor story. No.
Well, that's what we always say in these Scottish pubs. They all end up like singing and dancing and doing shortbread adverts and stuff. And John Gordon Sinclair's on his little motorbike outside, up and down the street.
So the podcast is into a trip to Malaga and back. Well, come on, Bruce, finish off again, because then he went to London as well, didn't that same weekend? And
he did, yes.
Another pub.
So again, forced to, we couldn't say no to the like Mike Richard, it's great rail sale. So took the family this time, and my daughter was determined to go on a pilgrimage to see the doors from the film Notting Hill and the little shop, which I have to say, I've not been before to Notting Hill, I have to be honest now. I was blown away by it. It was fantastic, just wonderful Georgian houses, obviously incredibly wealthy area now. We did I think everybody's made the mistake getting off at Notting Hill Gate, where in reality, if you're going down the Portobello Road, you really need to get off at Ladbroke Grove. But it did give us a chance to sort of walk down and take it all in and stop at a cracking Danish bakery. But however,
last time I was out that way, Bruce, it was a few years back now. It's still a bit of a dodgier area, really. Because there's a stunning Fuller's pub just on the edge of Notting Hill that connects Kensington High Street to that top road. Which is alongside one of the palaces, which is the Winston Churchill? It's a Fuller's pub, and it's absolutely covered in flowers. It's a wonder it can stand up because of the weight of flowers. So I know I went there and we stopped up near Notting Hill one time, and I think there's Holiday Inn, but it was the area was a bit dodgy. But like you say, with the influx of money, I suppose they've tidied and cleaned it up a bit now.
Well, crikey, we're likely to trip over loose £50 notes. It's insane there now. But you can imagine my delight when I stumbled across a Sam Smith's pub on the Portobello Road, the Earl of Lonsdale.
We're only 9 minutes in and we've got our first Sam Smith's. Good stuff.
But what a cracking pub it was. It's enormous. And I've been trying to look on the internet. I thought at one point it must have been kind of a merchant's, because downstairs it's all partitioned, these little rooms. And you can see there from YouTube, my wife said, it has these duck hunters, they call them. The partitions have little doors, they call them duck hunters. So you've got this island bar split into 4. And then beyond that, there's a huge room, big enough to accommodate 2 rail fires. Quite nice. Well, they do let you take photographs inside. Splendid find was that one.
That's the Earl of Lonsdale. Looks on right on the end of Portobello Road. Yeah.
The Earl of Lonsdale was his chap who was known as the Yellow Earl. and famously invented, was the founder of the Automobile Association, hence the yellow colours. Yeah,
Wasn't he also the Lonsdale belt as well in boxing? I think as well, the Earl of
no,
Lonsdale.
I don't think it was
Yeah.
actually. I
Oh,
think it was Duke of
okay.
Lonsdale from
We'll check that one
yeah.
out. So very good, Bruce. So a trip from both ends of the British Isles. Well, I didn't go quite as far. I ended up back in Buxton. I think if you remember, just over a year ago, it was one of my lifesavers, and that it was one of the few places around us that was open, because they managed to put a pop-up garden festival type place outside the actual brewery. They couldn't open their tap because it was too small. So took a visit back, and since last time I've been there, they've actually moved indoors. So you'll see them at the garden is still there, but they've actually built a little bar actually in the brewery. It's still in its early days. So it's still a bit, as you can see, then it does on YouTube, it's still a bit rough and ready. The downstairs bit is, upstairs is quite nice. And it literally is, you walk upstairs, and again, pictures on there on YouTube, and you actually literally are in the brewery. They only had a few beers on, so this is probably a better picture. It's quite nice. So the picture on the left there, they've kind of done a little wooden bit. The brewery's on the left, and I'm sat there with my back to the bar. And then the picture on the bottom right for those on YouTube, that's looking at where the beer garden was when they first opened, when we first came out of lockdown and it was outdoor drinking. So that is still there with a stunning view. But it was all right, yeah. So just had one cask beer on, and then I think they had 4 kegs on. But the guys behind the bar said it's only been open for about 2 weeks, so they're just going to start building the beer stock up. Obviously, Buxton do a phenomenal range of beers now. So it was quite nice to go back to Buxton and just revisit. It was very quiet, I've got to say. That was bank holiday Sunday, and it was pretty quiet. There was only about 4 or 5 of us. It was about 4 o'clock. And actually, amazingly, a lot of people still went to sit in the garden. So you can just about see there were some people huddled around the far end under one of the umbrellas. So back to Buxton Brewery, all very nice. And then I can trump Bruce in a way, because I paid on Friday night, I paid £7.50 for a pint. So I had a very, very long week at work. So did my local 2 down to the hot water cellar, a couple of beers, and then went across to Mellard's, and they had some nice cask on actually. But I thought, I'll go on, I'm going to treat myself. So they'd got this Verdant on, and all the lads behind the bar said, you've got to try it. It's stunning. So I went for this pint of Verdant, El Sol Cultura, it was named. And it's one that Nick and Bruce have those on YouTube, and this was £7.50 a pint.
What was the overwhelming flavour of it? What was the overwhelming flavour?
Right, well, I've done a bit of
yeast, Bruce. I would imagine.
Yeah, I did a bit of research actually. So apparently,
yeast.
Luke Una, which you can see on the pump clip there at the bottom, he is some very, 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 very famous DJ. So apparently he's a big DJ. He does, Ibiza and everything else. And he's also into his art. So he's done a project where he's got artists to do the art cover. So that's actually the cover of his new CD as well as being the pump clip.
Is you right then?
So it's tropical zippy IPA with hop rewaka, which I haven't heard about, leading, which means it's grapefruity, limey, and grapey. And it certainly was. And I'm still getting
tropical what, zippy?
that I paid £7.50. So Bruce went all the way to Skye and paid £7. Well, he did pay £7, and I managed to walk a mile down the road and pay £7.50 a pint. So I'm still getting over it. Anyway, talking of bargain beers, Nicholas, come on. So he mentioned this last podcast. Nicholas's little trip about go for these platters, go for a Wetherspoons 4-pint special.
You know how I like my tasting planks, where you can have a third of each beer. In our local hosteleries around here, they range in price from $3.60, which is excellent price, up at the Old Malton Royal Oak. Steve, the landlord up there, all his beers, he sets the same price. And then you can also go to the New Malton and have a plank as well. You're up to about $3.80, $3.90 in there. And then Gemma's other outlet at the moment is the Yorkshire Tapas and Grill bar, Omvi, slightly more expensive there. I think you're up to £4. But yeah, so you can try a third of each. Well, if you go to Wetherspoons, you can actually try a pint of each. So last time I went in there, did a little bit of my calculation. I mean, you'd be able to do it with your vouchers anyway, but when obviously you go for one of the meal deals, especially if you're taking elderly parents along who don't always necessarily want to have a drink, and other half who is driving so doesn't have a drink, it ended up that I managed to get 3 different pints and a bottle of Brewdog Elvis juice, which has now gone back up to the 6.5% ABV that it was originally. And then it came down to 5.1% now. At one time, Spoons had them both on offer. Went in last time. I didn't really want the 6.5%, but that's all they had. So that normally retails out of Spoons at $3.89. But I say if you have a part of your meal deal, then you get a free drink. And it's a 660 milliliter bottle, so it's actually more than a pint. So yeah, that was a good evening for me. I can't even remember what I ate, but it was 3 pints and a big bottle of Elvis juice for the equivalent of about £5 in money.
Yes, all in one city. Very good, very good. Right. Well, we might come back to that particular chain shortly. So a bit of beer news. Just quickly, a quick mention, because it's nice when we get a bit of feedback. So Mappy Man is somebody who I know has been a regular listener and been following us for quite a while. And he himself has a similar kind of take. He does a great blog about his trips. So it's well worth looking out. Blog or search for Mappy Man. And he gave us a tweet, I think, last week. He just said, love it. Keep up the good work. Listen to the last episode on a beach in Malaga, where the experience was heightened by listening to 3 chaps chunt on about Sam Smith. So you're very welcome, Mappy Man. Glad we kept you entertained on your holiday.
Can you imagine Humphrey in Malaga?
Well, he might have been.
What would he make of them bars with music and screens and football and yeah?
So I just thought again we might just have a interesting kind of contrast here, really. So first of all, Black Sheep are obviously carrying on to expand. They're bringing out quite a few new beers actually. The newest one is called Refresher, which I'm including that is very much aimed at the younger market, the lager drinkers who are now moving across to craft. So it's a blonde, it's 3.9%. And that was interesting. And I noticed that their Velo now is out on cask as well, which is, I think it's the Yorkshire one, wasn't it? They did.
That's what I was paying £4.20 for from their brewery tap 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
The Black Sheep Brewery Bistro. Yeah. No, the Refresher.
Oh, the Refresher, yes, that's the new.
They had it on, and it was okay, Bruce, but £4.20 when basically they're brewing it 50 yards away. How do they justify that price? Yeah. How do they justify it? And
then the other stories we mentioned last time we were on the podcast, I mentioned Proper Job, and I came across this. Hostel tweeted, that apparently the French cannot get enough of Proper Job. So again, there was a tweet, and for those on YouTube, that's another 25,000 litres. Around about 40,000 pints off in tanker, off to France.
It's a good beer.
Proper Job is now the best-selling English beer in France. So very.
It's in my top 3 bottle beers definitely, and it's always a treat to go into our local Lidl and they have it on there permanently. What, £1.69 a bottle?
Yeah,
that sort of price for a 5%, you can't beat it. It's one of my favourite bottle beers now. Is Proper Job.
A lot of brewers, when like on the podcast, when they ask about their best beer, a lot of brewers talk about Proper Job beer. And if you want a decent bottle, and I've got to say, when I was drinking it in cask in Devon, in the Victorian Salcombe, it was absolutely stunning, really, really good. And then
they reckon they based it on is it that Nevada Sierra?
Yeah.
And I tried a bottle of that, and I thought Proper Job's a lot better, actually. I was a bit disappointed to say that's often held up there as beers in the world, top 10 beers in the world that you've got to try. I managed to get a bottle of it from Morrison's, I think, and tried it. And I thought, well, I wouldn't put it in the top 10 of the world beers. But yeah, I read an article that suggested that when, say, Hostel were brewing there, when they started to put Proper Job together, that's what they were trying to achieve.
And then some cellar news in that, again, it was pretty much all over Twitter sphere this week that Kelham Island announced on the bank holiday that they were brewing their last ever lot of Pale Rider, and the brewery was going to start closing down. They're going to keep the Fat Cat. I think they have one other pub. But again, quite sad to hear. I mean, such a massive, not just, the brewery and the beer, but, the pub itself and all that.
Yeah.
One of the first ever real ale pubs in the UK. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago, obviously, that the founder, Dave, he died not that long ago, about a few months ago, wasn't it? So really, really sad. And we might come back to that because I know there's a story that links to one of our letters today. But then on the other side of that, I picked up Western Morning News on Saturday, a nice article there about Salcombe Brewery. And I'd mentioned them because I'd been drinking Salcombe beers the other week. And Salcombe Brewery have just built a brand new brewery. They've expanded 3 times over COVID, last 2 years. And there's quite a good article here about a guy who, again, typical story, John Tinner. He was a very successful businessman. He moved down to Salcombe, or just outside Salcombe, went in this local pub on his first night. He kind of moved in his new house and was drinking Salcombe Seahorse and said to the barman, "This is fantastic, this beer's lovely." And he said, to be honest with you, I think it's the last lot we'll ever get because the brewery's shutting down.
Wow.
So probably the day after, he got his bike and zipped up to the brewery that was in Salcombe and basically made them an offer. So again, I've said their beers are, I think they're a good range of beers. Seahorse is still a pretty nice beer. Not Millie Mile. It's more of a bitter. It's a bit more bitter style than say a pale ale. But interesting, differences there between a very well long-standing brewery. I mean, Pale Rider is again one of those standout beers, isn't it? It's,
I mean, I'm possibly suspecting. I mean, brewing is hard. It's difficult, and it's okay if you're coming into the industry because you're coming in with the enthusiasm and you're building your brand, and you're building your name. Kellam Island have got their brand, the name, but to keep competing and keep turning enough beer over and to keep it's hard work, isn't it? And I'm just wondering whether he's decided that after however long, 15, 20 years, he just doesn't want to get up at the crack of dawn in the morning and put in 12, 14-hour days, and obviously, just to keep competing, because there's so much more competition out there now. Well, as we know, in the last 10, 15 years, it's the real ale scene had just increased massively. And if you're going to keep up, you can't take the foot off the pedal. And I'm thinking, well, possibly he's thinking, I've done it for long enough now, and I can't put any more effort in than I'm already doing. And this is it, whereas new people coming into it, they're prepared to work 24/7 because that's their passion. That's why they decided to, do something completely different, open their own brewery and work at it. But sadly, that's why so many small independent breweries also fail as well, because they themselves realise that it's a lot harder than, just making a batch of beer in your back shed, as it were.
In fact, now you mention it, you rarely saw. I mean, I love Kellam Island Bitter. And of course, it's great the Fat Cat's saying no, but it won't be quite the same without the beers. But you rarely saw it elsewhere in the last few years, have you? Yeah,
no, not a big distribution. And plus,
you see them in bottles.
They only own 2 pubs, so I mean that's the other thing, isn't it? They haven't got that backup as well. Anyway, back to B&U. So Nick's, I think, got a bit of a teaser for us in terms of Malton. So for those on YouTube, there is a stunning picture on the screen at the moment. This was the old town hall, which sits prominently in the square in Malton. It was converted into a museum and then has recently become a stew and oyster. But Nick, you have news hot off the press.
Delight twinged with sadness. Went for my little walk out on Saturday evening, as I like to do, sort of around about tea time. Walked up the river, up to the Royal Oak first and foremost. Steve had an interesting range on in there, including a ginger and vanilla by Rudgate, one that was very, very fruity. So a couple of pints in the beer garden. Very quiet. They said they'd been busy during the day and they had a few people booked in for food. But in the time that I was in there, which would have been about 6:30, 7:15 in the evening, I would say there's no more than 10 people in the pub. This is Saturday night, remember. Walked into town, went to see Rory at Chapter 2, because this time he had Copper Dragon on in there. Once again, very, very quiet. Decided then to walk down to where I would normally go, Cross Keys. I thought, no, I'll walk past the Stew and Oyster. Now, our last experience of the Stew and Oyster, Mike, have been a bit disappointed. We've had to wait a long time to get a drink in the first place. All they had on was keg. Very expensive. But as I walked past one of those big tressed arch windows, looked through to the bar and saw they had the hand pumps on and what appeared to be traditional ale badge pumps on there. So I walked in there. Once again, this will take us to about 7:30, 7:45 on a Saturday evening. There was only me in there. There was an elderly couple upstairs who I'm not sure whether they'd been having a meal or just a drink. But I was delighted to see on the bar they had 2 hand pulls offering Ossett Blonde and 2 hand pulls offering White Rat. So had a conversation with the guy behind the bar, pointed out that Ossett give a 10% discount to camera card holders. Knew nothing about it, but managed to find a 10% discount button on the till. So got me pint of Ossett Blonde for £3.51, which means that we'll certainly be going back in there again. And yeah, it was just sad that in the time that I was in there, I had 3 pints. I had 2 blonde and a pint of rat. So I was in there for about just short of an hour. And in that time, there was 2 couples came in.
So who's taking it over then, Nick? Who's taking it over?
So Ossett have it.
Wow.
And they are going to rebrand it eventually, but not quite at the moment. So obviously they had the salt. They had the salt on the keg as well. They had the salt brewery. So yeah, I just really hope, because the first thing I said to him, I said, well, you need to get a signboard outside stating that you've got Ossett beers on now. I said, because even Saturday night is quiet, but there are people in town in Malton who appreciate real ales. And I said, so you need to let folks know to come back in again. I says, because anybody's experience of this place for the last year and a half, 2 years, hasn't been great as far as real ales concerned, and certainly not in terms of price and things like that concerned.
But it's going to turn into a hop then, do you think?
Well, I talked to him. He said, various people have suggested we should start doing sandwiches and all this sort of stuff. I said, well, obviously, the Stew and Oyster shot themselves in the foot when they had to admit on social media that all their food is pinged in a microwave, that there was no food being prepared. And I said, even though they were being honest, at the same time, if people are going out for a meal and it wants to be something special, they don't want boil in the bag stuff. Although we know that's what they do at Wetherspoons, but Wetherspoons, you accept that, and these other things going at Wetherspoons. So it was a young guy behind the bar. So he himself didn't know as much about the Ossett Brewery as I did, because he didn't know about the Fox, he didn't know about the hop in York. But he said, people are trying to persuade us we don't want to be a cafe, and we probably are going to be doing food, but as we know, with most Ossett pubs, they don't go down the food route, do they? I mean, at the Fox there, Bruce, it's more a wet-led pub, but then they make provision for food, as it were. Yeah. Whether this is what they're thinking, that there's other places to eat in town, there again there isn't in Malton. During the day maybe not so bad, but on an evening, to say it's the food capital of Yorkshire, you struggle to find somewhere to eat.
Shoving in there and turn into a hop. That would go well in Malton. I mean,
but if you think about it, the problem is with that place is there's no space for a catering kitchen, because the majority of that building that you can see on the picture there is the open plan where you sit, and it's the only bit at the back there that's in the shadow, which is only quite a small area. The bar's there anyway, so there's not room for a catering kitchen, which I think is why they were pinging meals before, because you think upstairs again, that's all open plan upstairs, like a mezzanine, isn't it? So,
but like you say, Bruce, the hop in York, they've got pizza oven in.
Yeah, but that was a pizza.
Small area.
That was a pizza. That was Italian restaurant breaking a pub, wasn't it? Not a town.
But the actual kitchen area, the prep area, and the oven itself, you don't need a lot of space. But it'll ultimately come down to what the estate want to do as well, because obviously the building's still owned by Fitzwilliam. And once again, I just hope that Ossett are aware and be sure enough to read the small print and know what, in theory, they let themselves in for.
Well, they're becoming a very big concern, our Ossett Brewery. I think they're pretty sure they have a big workforce. Yeah. I mean, I really like Ossett beers, but they are becoming prevalent everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are absolutely everywhere now.
This is what I said to the guy behind the bar. I said, the White Rat has been phenomenally successful. I said it was brewed by the Rat Brewery, which was a cuckoo brewery by Ossett. I said, but now they've pulled it into their own stable now, and I say you tend to see that more as a standalone beer than any other of Ossett's beers, to be honest with you. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy it. But yeah, that's the White Rat has been a phenomenal success for them. But no, once again, for another place for us to drop into now, Mike, it's a positive. It was just so sad to see Malton on a Saturday evening, just so quiet. I really did feel for all the publicans, all the landlords, all the managers, because I mean, that place, there was 2 young staff on. There's no way they were even covering their wages, with a minimum wage increase and things like that, and the cost of utilities, the overheads.
That's why they're charging £4 a pint, isn't it? And because that's what they've got the overhead. So anyway,
I was in London on Bank Holiday Monday. When you get the train back at 10 o'clock. And I tell you what, I was staggered at how quiet it was on the Bank Holiday Monday. Yeah. But obviously, by contrast, I was at Newcastle in Tynemouth and Whitley Bay on Saturday.
The weather was good, though, wasn't it?
It wasn't. At Tynemouth, was honest to God, you thought it was the Mediterranean somewhere. It was a food and drink festival, on, to be fair, but every pub was packed. And going back to the station in Newcastle on Saturday, our train was 8 o'clock. And at 7:30, going down Granger Street, then Grey Street towards the station, your only thought was, what's it going to be like at 11 o'clock? It was carnage then.
But that's Newcastle for you, bro.
Yeah, but I mean, my Newcastle...
The people in the north know how to work hard.
My Newcastle down here, that was fairly busy on Friday night. With Mellars, we stopped a bit longer than we normally do, and that was pretty full. And of course, the weather wasn't too bad, so people were inside and outside. They'd got a burger pop-up that was doing really good business, like out in the courtyard, so it was really good. Anyway, let's get back to tonight's theme, because we spent a long time chuntering there. So last time we pulled out of the bag the letters G, J, and W. So let's crack on. So here's Jack again, still giving us his songs. You must find out, Jack Hartman on YouTube. Look, just put the G word song and you'll see Jack. This guy's got 1 million followers just singing the letter G. Here's the letter G. Anyway, off we go. So, Nicholas, you're going to kick us off. So your first G was?
Had to be. We're talking about beer. It's got to be the Good Beer Guide. I mean, this was the Bible, certainly in the 70s and 80s, before the internet came along, before you could find out information through various apps in terms of you're going to a strange place, you don't know which pubs are safe to go into, you know, which pubs are going to get a decent beer in. So the Good Beer Guide was the Bible to have. It was always a bit of a hefty tome to carry around with you. And I think I mentioned this before, that year to year, it seemed to get bigger and thicker. I mean, the logistics are put together as well. You know, once again, CAMRA has been a voluntary organisation to a certain extent. So, you know, you've got all your local branches, gathering the nominations in, doing the voting, going, checking these places out, sending it in. And then it was Roger Protz, I think for many, many years, certainly he's done the intro. I think it was the editor of the Good Beer Guide. I mean, I know Roger's always been involved with it. So in fact, when I suddenly thought of G for Good Beer Guide, I looked at my shelf and I've actually got 10 volumes, which I think it's been on the go since 1973. So I tended to buy a copy sort of every 3 or 4 years because, sometimes from year to year, it didn't change very much. I think it does now, you know, because more pubs are opening, more pubs are closing, more pubs are embracing real ale, some will get rid of it. So you do get a little bit more of a variation. And I say, unfortunately, I think my last edition was 2018, simply because now it's just so easy to find reviews and guidance and advice online, isn't it? So maybe it has had its day. That said, there'll be plenty of beardy weirdies out there who will have the full rack of 43 or 45 on their shelves, and they will religiously buy it. I also should mention that I think this year's edition actually sold out, because I had considered going for it. And then when I went on CAMRA's website, it was identified as being sold out. So whether it's been reprinted or what, I don't know. But that certainly shows that there's still a requirement for it. So
it's a very reliable guide, though, isn't it? I mean, to be fair, if beer's your hobby, it's still the most reliable guide. You don't go far wrong. They never send you to a duff pub. I think you're right. I think it has stood the test of time.
But say that, Bruce. They always say it's the quality of the beer, not the ambience, and sometimes not even the friendliness of the pub. So it depends what you want. If you want the overall nice experience, sometimes they will take you to a spitting polish spot down a side street where people will turn around and look at you, because the locals who drink in there are recognised and they go in there for the quality of the beer. But, you know, CAMRA do say that, you know, do not take this as a guide of a nice, comfortable pub that you're going to get something to eat and your beer's going to be okay. Basically, most of the voting is done purely on the quality and the consistency of the beer. So you do have to be careful to a certain extent with them. But, in terms of it being your initial start point, your guide, then,
as I mentioned before, like Sam Smith's pubs don't often get in because there's only served Sam Smith's beer. So I'm just looking for Notting Hill Brews in this year's, and it doesn't mention your pub, but it does mention the Churchill Arms, which Nick mentioned, even though all they sell is Fuller's beers. But we'll get a minute, really. So I'm looking for Malton in the latest edition for Malton. Just 2 listings, which is a little bit sad, isn't it? Because these are about 8 or 9 listings in Malton. The Malton listings in the current edition are the Blue Ball and the Brass Castle Tap House. So they're the only 2 that made this year's. Obviously, there's quite a lot for York, isn't there? York's got a fairly good smattering of. I did look the other day how many were in York. There's quite a few. York's got Acorn, Bluebell, Brew York Tap, Golden Ball, Maltings, Market Cat, Phoenix, Rook and Gaskill, Slip-In, Swan, Three-Leg Mare, Volunteer Arms, and the York Tap. So I think we talked about all of those, I think. On our
most of those,
I mean, really, if you're being truthful, in terms of a pub that people enjoy seeing, to omit sort of the Phoenix is pretty criminal. Not to have the Roebuck in Appleton Roebuck is an absolute.
Well, that might be in because that's York City, so it might. Still,
no, there are a few mad omissions, and of course, far too many Wetherspoons pubs. You know, some should be there. There's far too many. You know, that's it.
Vouchers.
Yeah.
Right, so
but Bruce, you can go in Wetherspoons. You know you're going to be safe for one thing. Talking about this overall ambience,
I don't know.
You know,
I can take
both-
I can take a
You
few
probably
stone
think they're
rather than
regardless.
sleep.
well, put it this way: both my mother and my other half will happily go into Wetherspoons, but I would walk them down any street
Coffee's
in any
99p a cup.
in any town or any city, and they would be reluctant to go in on their own. But they know going in Wetherspoons. This is once again, this is one of these misnomers at Wetherspoons. Oh yeah, it's full of drunkards and it's full of idiots. But no, because the spotlight is always on them. Then in terms of their security and not allowing people to A, underage drink, and B, got absolutely paralytic, they're normally pretty good at clamping down on it. Whereas a lot of individual landlords basically think, oh, well, if I kick him out, he's one of my regulars.
Anyway, come on, you're using the W. We're still on G's at the moment. So the next G is my G. So my G is the Greyhound, which is a pub which is in between Stoke-on-Trent and Newcastle-under-Lyme. It's a Titanic pub. It's quite an old pub, actually. It was quite famous because it's got a very Art Deco inside, and I'll perhaps show you that. I know, Nick. I think you've both been in here when you've been down with me. Titanic took it over probably about 8 or 9 years ago now, and it's legendary because it's on the Hartshill Mile, which is kind of the Potteries version of the what's that one? The Otley Road run in Leeds. So
Micklegate. It's always a starting point when I come down for Christmas. That's our starting point, isn't it? Like,
so we're a bit old now, so we normally start halfway and work into Newcastle. You're technically supposed to start in Stoke-on-Trent, which is the kind of the old town, and you walk up the hill and down the hill, and so some good pubs there. So a cracking pub, and again, just inside, I say it's got this wonderful Art Deco bar, which is kind of all well, I don't know what it is, what kind of wood it is, but it's nice. They always have a load, obviously, not surprisingly, lots of Titanic beers, but normally a couple of guests, and Titanic have had a long relationship with Everard's, so you normally get Everard's Tiger on there as well. And it's a lovely pub. They do quiz nights, they do Irish nights. The bar there is always quite friendly. You can normally get a seat. There's a little room behind the bar there on the right, which is we've been a couple of times, and then a bigger lounge kind of around the back. So the Greyhound in Newcastle-on-the-Lyme, cracking pub. And then Bruce, you've chose a beverage for your G.
I have, yes. Jay, gone for Guinness, because surely there can be no other alcoholic drink in the world that so strongly identifies with its country of origin. I mean, amazing, astonishing, really.
Nigeria?
Belgium.
No, I did really. I instantly thought of Guinness, really. I just thought about it, really. I mean, it's absolutely such an iconic brand, isn't it, really? If you think of Ireland, well, the first you think of, really, Shamrock and Guinness. There can't be another drink in the world that is so linked up in the everyday culture of that.
Sounds like you've been on the Guinness now.
I did actually get to try some Guinness coffee porter the other day. They were giving little samplers out in Newcastle, and yes, it was it was a very slight hint of coffee, but I'd say it was uniquely Guinness though. And I did enjoy it, yeah. And I'm looking very much forward to going to the Grave Diggers soon on a trip to Ireland. So that thing as well. I can't ever think of a more eagerly anticipated drink than when you first go to Ireland, get off the plane or the ferry. That very first sip of that very first pint, I don't think there's a drinking experience like it anywhere in the world. That first glug when you go to Ireland, it is absolutely insane. So yes, cheeking for Guinness.
And when it's on form, even in England or wherever you are, when it's a good pint, it's a good pint, isn't it? And it's one.
Yeah. It is. I have to say the best pint Guinness I've in England was a few months ago at O'Shea's in Manchester, and I'm told the pint in Mulligan's is even better. Right. But we went to Manchester. We're going to go to O'Shea's, but we're going to go to the Circus Tavern. That was closed till about mid-afternoon. Even though it was a Saturday. Some friends said O'Shea's will be open. It's a bit of a nondescript pub that comes alive on a Sunday afternoon, apparently, because they get invite the best Irish bands around the country and from out to go and perform in there. It's absolutely packed. They only serve breakfast, I believe, a proper Irish breakfast, a sort of clonakilty black pudding and imported sausages. Lots of people having breakfast. But I have to say, the Guinness was absolutely on a different level to anything I've had in this country.
What's the ABV on Guinness now as well? Because it always seems that, when you're on Guinness, you don't seem to get as drunk as if you're drinking
very
other
true.
beers.
Yeah, well, they say that's something to do with the makeup of it as well. I think it's about 4.5, isn't it? But they do reckon.
I don't think it's as strong as that.
They do reckon that it's part of the way that it's made as well. That it's So we'll have a look. I don't know if you picked up yesterday. You see that Paul Heaton from the House Martins and the Beautiful South
£60,000
supposed to be doing a 60th birthday tour around pubs, and he couldn't do it. So he'd given 60 pubs £1,000. So there was one here in Stoke, the coaching horses had given £1,000. And my local to my college in St Helens, the Birdie Hand, and I'm thinking that because Johnny Vega was in there, he was drinking his pint of Guinness. And tweeted, thanks to Paul Heaton. So fantastic gesture, giving 60 grand away. Bloody fantastic. Yeah, good whole boy. So yeah,
Guinness. 4.1 to 4.3.
Oh, there we go. So I wasn't far off with 4.5.
Maybe.
And that's its second mention because we mentioned it in the V's, because we had Black Velvet, didn't we? So it's Guinness has come up twice in the charts. Right. Moving on to the letter J. Now I thought we'd have a bit of a change. So I found another freaky guy on the internet that does song as well. So I can't remember his name, but here he is. I think my lad knowed him. This guy's called Pimbo or something. Anyway, there we go. So I'm going first, and I'm going to stick with the brewery. So we mentioned them a few times on previous podcasts. From Stone, although now brewing in Market Drayton, the world famous Jowls' brewery. We've talked a lot about the trademarks, and these were the second biggest brewers in the world after Bass, and there was a massive competition back in the days in the Victorian era. So Jowls' brewery, J for Jowls. Lots of pubs around me. I actually found another one on Sunday when I was out for a bike ride out in the wilds, which is kind of pub that Bruce would like, the Fox and Hounds, in a place called Chaswardy, which is very, very nice. And the brew we've mentioned before, the brewery now is based in Market Drayton, although they claim that they're on the same aquifer that stretches to Stone. I mentioned that in the brewery there, the nice link to Yorkshire, because in the rear room, they've got Mousy Thompson. They've got the whole boardroom of a big company in Leeds that when they're breaking it up, they bought the boardroom paneling. And I think there were something like 32 mice in that room. And they've also got Mousy Thompson furniture as well. So that's very impressive. Mm-hmm. And obviously, Nick and we talked in our previous podcast. I took Nick to the new Jules' Wharf, which is back to almost the home of where the brewery initially was, very in Stone, and it very much dominated the town of Stone back in the days. And they're hoping that they will get some brewing back there as well. And again, I think you were quite impressed, weren't you, with that the Wharf?
Yeah.
The beer's kind of all right. Probably for me, the blonde is probably my choice. Pale ale's not bad. It can be a bit hit and miss sometimes. It's one of those kind of beers really that it's either on form or it's not on form. But generally the good thing. So Jowls' was my J. So Nick, you similar in a way, you've chosen another beer.
Yeah, I think it was this beer that turned wine drinkers and lager drinkers to real ale. I think Os Clarke was very, very popular and famous in the mid to late 1990s. He named it as his favourite beer. He brought a lot of attention to it, and it's Stonebridge's Jaipur. And this was, and it still is branded as the IPA, but it's the modern IPA. It's one of those IPAs that's full of fruit flavour. Bruce mentioned it last week because he'd found it in Wetherspoon for £2.19. But it's one of those you can make yourself poorly on. And I know, Bruce, when we've been out a few times halfway through a session, we've seen it and we've sort of gone, we can't really afford to have that because it's too strong for us. Once I think the ABV's come down a little bit on it. Is it about 5.6 now?
It's 5.9, I think. I think it's still 5.9. And
right.
I've gone to 6 as well.
It's one of those that is so deceptive. If you got somebody a pint of that and said, here, have a good neck of that, they would have no problem at all in drinking it and saying, right, I'll have another one of them, and then start wobbling about 15, 20 minutes later.
Yeah, it's just still 5.9. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of those that often I can't enjoy because, if I'm out and having a session, I'm having 4 or 5 pints, I'm thinking, well, if we have 1 or 2 of those, it's going to tip me over the edge, really. But yeah, it's one of those that it cut the cloth, it broke the mold when it came to that unique, fruity, floral flavour as far as an IPA was concerned. And as I say, it's still there. Once again, I would suggest that, in fact, there are actually better tasting IPAs out there now. And whether it's because it's become so popular, they've taken their finger off the, what shall we call, the artesian, the quality control. We've mentioned this a lot of times about breweries. When they start to knock it out in such massive quantities, then perhaps they're not able to control and keeping an eye as closely. We've said this about Taylor's Landlord, and we've said it about those other iconic beers out there. Or perhaps it's also because, it was such a unique flavour when you first tried it.
Yeah, I think
and then
moved on.
Other people have come along and tweaked, they've aimed at that and then tweaked it to make a slightly different taste. And that's why sometimes it's worked and sometimes it's not. And maybe that's why I'm thinking about other beers now that I would actually put above Jaipur. But in terms of an iconic beer, J is Jaipur.
Yeah, and I remember a night that my brother-in-law had down at the local cricket club where they sponsored the barrels, so every beer was £2 a pint. Whatever the ABV. And I said to Andrew, Andrew, we've got to drink Jaipur tonight because it's 5.9%. It's only £2 a pint. So rather than drinking the 3.5% stuff, and we had about 9 pints of it, and you do suffer. Again, I mentioned that there's a night. Well, sorry, Nick, do you remember we went to the brewery? Me and Nick, we had a brewery tour a few years ago now, but they were saying then that Jaipur is almost 50% of what they output is still Jaipur. And I think you remember, Nick, they'd just done that deal with Tesco's, where I think it was something like 4 cans for £8. They said Tesco's are selling it cheaper than the brewery can sell it. Because
it was a lost leader, but it was getting their name out there.
I think it was 4 cans for £8 at the time, something like that. And it was they said we in the brewery we can't sell it at that price. So it was one of those that had undermined it slightly. I think it was 8 cans for 4, something like that. Anyway, interesting link here. I mentioned that link with Kellam Island. So just reading a bit of the background. Obviously, Jim Harrison is the guy who bought the Thornbridge Hall initially, and he realised that it actually had a brewery attached to it when he bought it, a very small brewery that in the past would have brewed the gardener's beer, and apparently was still a pipe that ran out to a tap in the garden from the brewery that you could, slunch your thirst. And by all accounts, he was holding a garden party at Thornbridge Hall in the early days, and he just brewed some beer, and he was handing it out, and this guy called Dave Wickett was there. And Dave Wickett was the guy who was setting up Kellam Island and opened the Fat Cat. And in fact, the Pale Rider was doing so well, he was looking for somewhere to brew a bit more for him. So he made an offer, and that was it, really. That was the birth of Thornbridge Brewery. So they stayed at the hall for a fair while, and then they expanded and moved more towards Bakewell and the brewery there, which again has just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think since Nick's been there, they've doubled the size of it. And obviously got a very nice tap now. They appointed 2 very young brewers. A bit at the time was a little bit on the edge. One guy, an Italian guy called Stefano, and in fact he brought across the whole of the kit. Basically their kit is actually Italian. It's an Italian system that they use. And a young guy called Martin Dickey. And Martin Dickey, of course, famously went on to meet a guy called James Watt and set up Brewdog. He started at Thornbridge. And they wanted to kind of be the first brewery that produced this new American, as Nick said, fruity, zingy type of pale ale with a bit of strength as well that nobody else was drinking. Those kind of that strength of beers, really. And it's called Jaipur. Do you know why it's called Jaipur?
Because Indian pale ale.
It's called Jaipur because it's where the guy Harrison got married. He got married in Jaipur, so it's a bit like Beckham's kids. They named it after when he was married. So it's an Indian pale ale, but also because he was married in Jaipur, the city of. So J is for Jaipur for Nick. And Bruce is, again, we're on a similar theme because Bruce has picked a brewery for his J.
Did have it as a picture. J.W. Lee's, the infamous Manchester brewery. Yes, I love Lee's beers. I like the heritage behind them as well. I mean, they're in a real poor part of Manchester, aren't they? To Grimshaw Lane in Middleton. I mean, Middleton's as working class it gets, isn't it, around Manchester? And there they are, though, still there. They're not moved to out-of-town premises or anything like that. Regional breweries there. Sadly, no brewery tours available. I did check, which I was quite about. But I have to say, made me think about this because earlier this year we went to Manchester for a day, and we went to what I thought was a Lee's-owned pub hotel in central Manchester. But I looked at the directory, found it wasn't actually. I think it was an independent one. They obviously borrowed some money off Lee's. It was solely Lee's branded. And that Manchester Pale Ale they brew now, I think is possibly the best pint I've had this year. It was absolutely fantastic. It's almost a creamy pale ale, but the beers are always absolutely fantastic. The pubs are great as well. I just love everything about Lee's. The old feel of it all, the way they go about the business. They don't make a great big fuss, do they? And I say the beers are fab. They have started producing some keg like everybody now, I say, but they make a big fuss. But there's obviously a huge choice of range of beers in their pubs as well. But yeah, it's like the whole heritage.
Yeah, in a way, I guess they're a bit like Smiths, aren't they? In that they're 1828, they still have their own Victorian brewery, like you said, in Midland there. There's a nice picture of it there for those on YouTube, the Greengate Brewery. They have a fairly solid range, bitter, dark, John Willys, which is a slightly kind of an ESB. And you mentioned the newer beer, the MPA, which is their Manchester Pale, Moonraker, and they did a collab with Marco Pierre White as well.
So their dark must be, because I always remember Lee's mild. I always tended to migrate towards their mild, but I don't see the mild listed on there now. So is that what their dark is?
Yeah, I think it'll do a mild. And of course, the famous one is Moonraker, which is a kind of very strong ale. I think, again, that is 6.5%. Do you know why it's called Moonraker?
No.
Story?
James Bond.
No, Moonraker. Story is that when the brewery was first built in the 1820s, there were quite a lot of farms around that area of Midland, which they would have been because it's kind of on the edge of the moors. And apparently a local farmer drowned raking the moon out of a pond, which he thought was a wheel of Lancashire cheese. So the story is that that's why it's called Moonraker, because he's trying to rake a cheese out of the pond, which is actually, so he's had a few beers and it was actually not a cheese, it was the moon. So there you go, that's Moonraker, that's why it's there. So quite a beery theme for our J's. So let's move on to W's, and I'm going to kick us off. So here's Jack again with a lot of W. So my W is a pub. Well, it's not really, it's a village which got a pub in it. So the village is Westow, which is a very old village, just outside of Malton.
I was born there.
Yeah, there you go. Bruce was born there because where the maternity hospital used to be in the good old days. And
in a turnip field.
It's near Kirkham Abbey and the Stone Trough. But the pub, and it's one that we certainly went to a hell of a lot when we were younger. And probably for me, it was the first pub that I probably went in there and drank, is the Blacksmith's Arms. And apparently I learned today it was called the Blacksmith Inn for a while, but it's now the Blacksmith's Arms. It's bang in the middle of the village. It's over 300 years old, so a lovely little typical Yorkshire village with Yorkshire stone. Again, the picture there for those on YouTube. It's a bit maybe a bit like that pub Bruce was about before. It's a pub for everybody. It's become quite an eaty pub, but they still the locals still go in. There's a bit of an area where you can have a drink, kind of on the side, where they tend not to serve food, but they always have at least 3 beers on Nick, don't they? Normally, a good range of Yorkshire beers, Black Sheep's on. Pippin and bar there.
I've been for a while with COVID and everything else, and like you say, it became very popular eating. So it's a case of having to book in. Last couple of times we've just been having a walk around Kirkham Abbey around there, so we've just literally sat outside actually, because it's one of those places. It's more food than drink now. Yeah. And as you say, whilst they encourage the locals, you sort of push them to one at the side of the bar now. Yeah. If you sit down at a table in the bar or in the restaurant, then you can't just have a drink. I'm sorry, that table for food, but yeah, it was somewhere that we've always and still is. Certainly, the quality of the food. It's our go-to place for steaks. It's actually run now by a farming family. And while it's nice to see, it's also twinned with a little bit of, when you go in the gents' toilets, they have some stunning photographs of their beef herd, which are the large white Charolais beef cows. Anybody who's been on the railway from York to Malton, you go past what's known as Kirkham Abbey, which is a very, very picturesque setting. And they have the fields there that often the cows will graze and then go down to the river and have a cool down. So, yeah, it's, you go in the toilets and see these wonderful beasts, these wonderful animals, realise that's what you've been eating. But for the size of the steaks and the quality of steaks, one of the best value places around as well. You go in these chain pubs, you're paying 15, 20 quid for a 8-ounce sirloin, as they class it. And because it's pumped full of water, by the time it's actually come off the grill or wherever they're cooking it, it's probably down to about 4 or 5 ounces. Here, they don't put a weight on the steak. The least size minimum steak I've probably ever had there would be a 14 ounce, and you're not paying much more than £20 for it. So certainly to have a decent steak and to have a decent pint of Yorkshire beer as well, if anybody's coming up this way, get yourself booked in. Certainly recommend it.
I think for me and Michael, it was, I said, probably the first place that we drunk. We'd go up on our bikes, age 15. Now, Missy, there was a Taylor family who had it then, And Mrs. Taylor would never serve you beer, but the thing is, she didn't class Woodpecker cider as being alcohol, so you were allowed to drink halves of Woodpecker cider, which was probably stronger than most beers, the Tetley's and Camerons they had on the bar, because for some bizarre reason, she never classed Woodpecker cider as being alcohol and found it perfectly reasonable to shovel half after half of Woodpecker cider 15-year-olds out of the village.
And plus, in the picture there, you're there on the outside on that window on the first. There was a pool table in that room, and that's where we were all cajoled, weren't we? She let us all go in the pool table because you couldn't see the bar.
Yeah,
it was around the corner, and you could drink as much cider as you wanted, as long as you kept yourself to yourself. And like you said, we used to bike up there from Mull. It's about 4 or 5 miles. It's on a lovely cycle route. So again, if you are in that area and you fancy dropping in again, it won't always be open at lunchtimes. But certainly early evenings, especially this time of year, is a really nice place. So that's my W. And then the final W, because you both picked the same one, and we've already mentioned them several times, is Mr. Martin's wonderful chain, Weatherspoons. So you both picked them, I think, probably different reasons. So come on, Bruce, you go first. Why did you pick Weatherspoons?
Well, I've been thinking long and hard about this, really. Now, I mean, I do go to Weatherspoons occasionally, and it's quite fun to tick.
You go more than I bloody do, Bruce.
I know, but on balance, they're a terrible, terrible thing, aren't they, really? And actually, the feeling was compounded by watching that program on Channel 5. Now, what on earth possessed him to make that program? I always thought the curries that I had, the curries came in. It was like a little ready meal, pulling the plastic back and putting it in the fork in the microwave. And his bacon's pre-cooked, and he was deep frying sausages. I mean, God Almighty, it was appalling.
That's why it's £3 for breakfast, not £8.
Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, look, they're a huge chain, and like everything, like the good and bad. But I mean, and I do think they've been a terrible thing for the pub industry generally. But what I do find strange is this bizarre propaganda he's pumping out in all the pubs now. I mean, you know, he had a few bit of negative articles about in the lockdown, so he's published hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these magazines. And, you know, it's the actions of a bloody dictator, isn't it, really? It's insanity, and the things litter up the pubs, and they're sticky, and they're smeared in ketchup. They are bloody awful. The food's disgusting. The beer's often cheap, varies widely. I'm like Nick, really. I mean, I pretty much know. But that, around yesterday, we have one of the finest Weatherspoons in the country. I think the Harrogate Weatherspoons is pretty fantastic. The one in Northallerton, they've made a nice job of that, but they're going to get some serious competition soon when the old police station opens. And I do understand they're very disappointed with the Northallerton takings. And of course, people are turning against them. They've closed to London recently, haven't they? They've tried a bit of a
no, they've not. They've not closed them, Bruce. It's because the leases have come up, and there's another pub chain down there. Is it or Hanlon's or something like that? Have got in and bought a couple of their sites out instead.
Well, no, what's been happening is apparently
the
plan is they're trying to adopt a Vladimir Putin type blitzkrieg on small, what they could be poorish towns. For example, so really interesting about Mansfield. There are 4 Weatherspoons in Mansfield, apparently. And apparently it's literally closed every other pub in town. This isn't good news for pubs. It's not good news for competition. It's not good news for people who want to buy decent food or produce decent food, because the whole thing's a race to the bottom, isn't it?
But the pubs that are closing in Mansfield, then, Bruce, are you saying they stood head and shoulders as the quality of their food? Well, if they did, then they'd still have.
No, they're trying to charge. They need to charge £3.50 for a pint of beer, and they can't undercut Weatherspoons charging £1.90 or 99.
But we've spoken about this before.
They destroyed all the choice.
The pubs that make money out of food are completely different to wet-led pubs that make the money out of beer.
Well, they don't make them on that beer because people go to Weatherspoons and pay £1.90 or £1.40 with the vouchers, and therefore, you know, there's no way a pub can charge that, especially as you said in this day and age. You've got to charge £4 plus.
That's fine, but Bruce was criticising the food, basically saying that other pubs are closing down because you're serving cheap crap food.
Well, I think the whole thing is everything, they're undercutting everything to mad extreme. I mean, it's bad for competition. I mean, you know, and you know, let's be honest.
Right. I think the prosecution is over. I'm not quite sure where Bruce Shear's with us, but come on, Nicholas, you've got a minute to kind of give it some defence.
Pubs run by bean counters.
Well, he's not. He's a working class bloke that's done good, Bruce. Yes.
I think he went to private school, Nick. I'm not quite sure that makes you working class. He went to private school.
Well, he certainly didn't have a big wad of money in his ass pocket. He started in the business like everybody else did, with the Spit and Polish pub, one pub in London, and then basically did something different, developed it from there. So you can't knock him as far as that's concerned, in terms of a lot of our pub chains, a lot of our independent pubs now are basically bought into and owned by people that aren't interested. It's just a business to them. Whereas he's still interested in his business, in his pubs. Anyway, so coming back to what I mentioned earlier on, in terms of an environment where everybody can go in there, a safe environment, even though Wetherspoons have a reputation about being rough old places because they're selling cheap alcohol. I've never actually seen anybody chucked out of a Wetherspoons pub. I've seen plenty of people chucked out of what you could call nice pubs, bad pubs, even down to things like swearing. We know Humphrey's got a very, very strict regime about swearing. But once again, yeah, there are some, shall we say, very, very working class Wetherspoons. But once again, what I've seen from a lot of the staff, they are pretty good at clamping down on it and making sure that people aren't served more than they should have. The other thing that I liked about Wetherspoons as well was when they introduced the coffee machines. Because mentioned it earlier on again, when I go out with my mother and my other half, often they don't want an alcoholic drink. And the worst thing in the world was walking up to Wetherspoons bar and asking for 2 coffees, because it used to just take so long. Now it's literally 2 empty cups, go and help yourself, as many coffees as you want. And when I can persuade my other half that she might want another coffee and I will get up and go and get it for her, it means I can have another pint. Whereas a lot of other pubs, it's a case of, well, do you want another coffee? It's going to be another £3. And we've got to wait another 15, 20 minutes while they mess around with the barista coffee machine that doesn't any better job, but they have to make it look as like they're taking a lot of time and effort with it because it's going to cost us £3. So that's another thing I like. Yeah, you talk about the food again, but if I need to pop in somewhere, like when we go to London, if we've got a theatre show to go and see, and we've only literally got 40 minutes, we know we're going to get served in 10 minutes to quarter of an hour. We're not looking for haute cuisine. We're not looking for tea at the Ritz. We're looking for something to basically fill a hole, and you know you're not going to be worrying because half an hour later you're chasing people saying, is our food coming? Is it going to be much longer? So that's another reason I like with Wetherspoons. You can set your clock. You know how I like a schedule. I know I like a regime. I can pretty much know how long I'm going to be in a Wetherspoon for, and I know how long it's going to take to get served, how long it's going to take for my food.
You pop into Iceland and ask to borrow a microwave oven, exactly the same food for a lot less money.
but
right,
once again,
a
lot of the places you go and you will still find that's how it is.
Time out, right? I think you've given a good defence there. And just for fact checking, Tim Martin, father, was a senior member of the RAF, and then he actually worked for Guinness, and in the end he became the managing director for the whole of Malaysia in terms of promoting Guinness. Tim Martin was educated in private schools in New Zealand, but actually finished his schooling in Campbell College in Belfast, which is probably the richest, poshest school in Belfast. And he actually trained as a barrister, although he has actually never practiced as a barrister.
So what was his first job starting on his own 2 feet?
Him and his brother ran a pub which went out of business in 1979 in Muswell Hill. But anyway, so just to fact check, I don't think class is working class, and his dad was the managing director of the whole of Malaysia for Guinness, and he went to the poshest school in Ireland. Anyway, the W, as always, folks, we've managed to get Sam Smith and Wetherspoons in every podcast, so without fail. Right, so that's been an interesting night. So I'm going to pull out the next 3 letters for our next podcast. So
last time you pulled out the same letter that we'd already had.
I'm digging in here now. I think I have pulled them all out. I'm hoping I pulled out the ones that I have done. So we've got the letter.
You're aware that with the Scrabble game, there are more than 1 letter of each.
Yeah, but I've took all the letters out, Nicholas. I've just put 26 letters in. That's
all right. Okay.
So we have the letter Q.
Oh, well, everyone's going to choose the same thing there, aren't they? The pub in Stalybridge.
Or the Queen's Heads, or the Queens, or Queer Brewing, and the letter U. Ooh, that's quite a hard one.
Nice.
The letter U. And the last letter is the letter I. Ooh. So those are our 3 letters. But I think the next one we're actually doing, we'll maybe record this even this weekend, is obviously I've got to give you an update on drinking in South Devon. So that was Mindful Soiree Easter. So I've put that together. So we might do that first. And then the week after, we'll do the letters Q, U, and I, which I think they'll need a bit of thinking, won't they, to go through those. So any plans this week, gentlemen, before we round up?
Working.
Sadly, in terms of drinking, I have to, unfortunately, I've got to, because I can't make it, I've got to go to York Races on Thursday. So unfortunately, I shall be into the realms of drinking terrible
£8 pints of
£7 pints of Carling, which would be pretty awful. Then
Take your colostomy bag with you, Bruce. Have your own Allen sauce.
Then I am going up to the Crooked Billy on Friday. Then sadly, then he's going to enter a period of enforced houseboundness because Chris is having an operation. Unfortunately, I'm going to be stuck in, so it's going to be a bit of a desert then for me.
No, I don't think so, Bruce. I think after putting up with you for 24/7 for more than 2 days, you'll be safe. Bruce, you can go out. Honestly, go.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I was out on the bike.
All my children will look after me.
I was out the bike on Sunday. I've got the bike out again, and the weather's nice. So I quite did a 30-mile bike trip, but ended up having like 4 or 5 pints at the end of it because you feel like you've earned them. It may not be the best thing. So I think that's my plan. Normal Friday night down my locals, then probably get on the bike Saturday or Sunday and have a little tour around and a couple of pubs up. So we will hopefully see you in about a week or so's time. So I will play the funky music to finish off. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Funky.
As always, a good debate, a good discussion, and we'll see you next time.
It's not started again, has it?